We understand that we cannot be a member of NATO during the war, said Zelensky, but we need to be sure that after the war, we will be. Good afternoon, this is Henry Keane on UATV English, wrapping up the Hard Truth in Easy Terms in our weekly episode. Good afternoon. It did not happen yet. However, did Zelensky and his team really expect it to? Or rather, considering what Ukraine has really pulled out of Vilnius NATO summit, they think it is somewhat enough for the time being. So what have Ukraine gotten anyway? Simplified accession procedure, no MAP, a straightforward one-step process instead, which is great. A Ukraine-NATO Council is a new body to control the relationship, aid and feedback. That is even better. The more direct the connection is, the better. However, why not to let Ukraine into alliance right now? The USA and Germany said it's not yet the time. Why? Maybe the ignorance is the answer. The absurd ignorance of those politicians, especially in the United States, who were living in the United States all their lives and really think that reality just ends where the US borders end. Europe, Ukraine, the war and its atrocities, shelled cities, dying children in Ukraine, it is all not really happening unless not happening on the US soil. Such a homegrown approach is not only short-sighted, it may be leading the world community, and America is still in the lead of the collective civilized world, to an inevitable general failure, both reputational and geopolitical. NATO has been irresponsibly inactive since 2008, when in Bucharest these half-life promises have awakened the criminal ambitions of the outdated Soviet dictator Putin, giving him a pretext for attacking Ukraine. It is sad fact, and yet, in general, it somehow turns out in Vilnius to be not so bad after all for Ukraine these days. Weaponry, financing, long-term support of the alliance, whether all that derives out of the real understanding of the situation or rather out of the sense of guilt for alliance inability of making decisions does not really matter for Ukraine. As long as we receive weapons and assistance, we need so much today. On the other hand, this may come as a revelation to some NATO officials. Both actions and inactions each have their own consequences, and the latter, in my humble experience, is way larger in scale, whether good or bad. Well, we wait and see. The fact today is that Ukraine has gained this during the summit. From the United States, 31 155mm howitzers are coming, 32 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles and 32 Stryker armored personnel carriers, 28 million rounds for small firearms. A large number, it is not reported exactly how large for the purposes of secrecy, hand-launched missiles, grenades, Stingers and Javelins, as well as drones, an impressive amount of transport equipment. Germany is transferring 25 Leopard tanks, 2 Patriot complexes, 1 lunar UAV system, and a lot of other weapons and equipment are being transferred right now. Great Britain, Australia, Norway, Czech Republic, France, Canada and Slovakia will give no less. Among the transferred are helicopters, shells, vehicles, weapons including cluster munitions, NASAMS systems and control sensors. A very significant aid package, is it not? Let me remind you, it is not the last one, and this is great news no matter what, since we know exactly where and how to put this help of a very good use. On July 13th, Ukrainian forces carried out counter-offensive operations on at least 3 frontline sectors and made progress in some places, in particular in the western part of Zaporizhia Oblast, and advanced around Bakhmut. Institute of Study of War analysts draw attention to the fact that Russian Major General Ivan Popov, a former commander of the 58th Combined Arms Army, CAA, alleged in a leaked audio that Sergei Shoigu, the Russian defense minister, fired him for persistently complaining to higher commanders about issues in the western part of Zaporizhia Oblast. The institute has previously noted that Putin ignored complaints from Russian officials who spoke on behalf of Russian military personnel, likely to distance himself from Russian military failures. The ISW also assessed that public disagreements between Russian troops in Ukraine on supplies and combat missions, as well as the obvious need for the Russian Ministry of Defense to negotiate with subordinate commanders on these issues, indicate serious problems in the system of subordination. I wonder what could be the reason for such a lack of subordination. Could it be the imaginary success of Putin's army that is becoming more and more exposed to international public, looking like a real failure these days as Ukraine slowly advances? Since Ukraine advances even without any air superiority. And even without any superiority in weaponry and ammunition, on contrary, smaller in size Ukrainian army advances even through hundreds of thousands of mines on its way, even having the Kremlin doing all it can to stop it. I could have been giving you more figures and experts and opinions, but instead of that, I will give you the hard truth in easy terms. We have a secret weapon in this war, the one that will make sure Ukraine will win. It is called motivation. We fight for our lives, you see? Homes, families. Ukraine is our homeland, and it has been occupied by Russia. And you do not have to be an Institute of Study of War to see the obvious. We are not going to give up on our homeland. July 16th is the day of state sovereignty of Ukraine. Ukraine is defending its sovereignty, and the fight against the Russian invasion is going on now. We understand sovereignty as an unquestionable right of Ukrainians to be masters on their own homeland and not to obey the Russian occupiers in any way whatsoever. The war has clearly shown sovereignty is a matter of survival. Ukraine is grateful to its allies for their outstanding contribution to maintaining its resilience by helping Ukraine. Western partners do not encroach on its sovereignty. Ukraine seeks to become no less than a full member of the EU and NATO for a simple reason: this institution strengthening the country without restricting its sovereignty. Let me quote the text of the Declaration of the State Sovereignty of Ukraine for you briefly. Expressing the will of the people of Ukraine, striving to create a democratic society, acting on the need of comprehensive guarantees of human rights and freedoms, respecting national rights of all nations, caring for the full-fledged political, economic, social and spiritual development of the people of Ukraine, recognizing the necessity to develop a constitutional state, aiming to establish the sovereignty and self-rule of the people of Ukraine, proclaims state sovereignty of Ukraine as supremacy, independence, integrity, and indivisibility of the Republic's authority within the boundaries of its territory, and its independence and equality in foreign relations.
The adoption of the Declaration of State Sovereignty of Ukraine became the first legal and important decision before the next step, the adoption of the Act of Declaration of Independence of Ukraine. Now Ukraine is fighting for its lands, people, freedom and independence. Every moment strengthening sovereignty at the front and in the rear. We pay an incredible price, the lives of our best sons and daughters. We will win, we will rebuild. Let's be strong. Alexander Kornienko, first deputy of chairman of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, on Facebook.
Now, going back to those foreign relations and security guarantees issue, in response to the G7 statement about the intention to provide security guarantees to Ukraine, Kremlin spokesman Peskov said that such guarantees encroach on Russia's security. Peskov, typically for Russian propaganda, adds that he, the Kremlin and the old Russia considers NATO an offensive alliance that is dangerous. And Comrade Peskov is right. Not only NATO, any alliance that cannot be controlled by the Kremlin is dangerous to it, obviously. This is exactly that outdated Soviet paradigm, you see, professed by the Kremlin, the one Ukraine shatters with its rebellious sovereignty. This is why the Kremlin, Putin and the overwhelming majority of Russians considering dangerous for them, which in turn is, of course, good for the whole world. Time for more on UATV. That was the question. I mean it, a very solid, and I must admit that. The question by Tank and Dimples. Without the Kerch Bridge and the land bridge, how can they expel the Russian from Crimea? Please, dear Tank and Dimples, let me understand your question as how can those Russians leave the Crimea after it has declared as Ukrainian as it should be? Well, I can hardly help myself now from answering they can't. But the real answer is they don't have to. Unless you were an official collaborating with occupiers, someone who forcibly implanted a criminal, predatory, occupational Russian power, if that is not the case, nobody expels you. Stay if you like. Leave when and if you want. Even to Russia, we are going to make sure a safe corridor is established. Don't like Ukraine and Ukrainian ways? Hit the road, Jack, and see you, or better make sure we won't. Anyway, we are not Russians, see? We don't dig those pits in the ground and don't shoot people in the napes for being of wrong ethnicity or mindset, just as Russians did in Bucha to us, Ukrainians. No way we do the same. The other thing is, however, If you did collaborate with occupiers, if you did help them to implant their criminal power, well then you would have to face the trial to state the extent of your responsibility. Then either you are extradited to your beloved Russia, or if you did help to oppress and murder your fellow Ukrainians, well then I guess I don't have to help myself anymore in avoiding the answer I was going to give initially. You are not going anywhere. Moreover, even if you try, wherever you go, you'll be found. And you'll be held accountable for your actions and crimes, whether you like it or not. It was Henrique on UATV State Channel giving the hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. And I suggest you follow the link below and see my interview with Chris Miller, a Financial Times journalist, a reporter who spent 2 years living in Bakhmut, a brilliant author who just finished his book The War Came to Us, Life and Death in Ukraine, covering almost 10 years of Russian invasion of Ukraine. Yes, the invasion started that long ago, and Chris clearly proves why. Listen to the story in our interview, follow the link, like, comment and subscribe. Let us know what you think. We much appreciate your opinion. I'm saying my goodbyes now. My dear colleague Paul Stelmach will take good care of you all along next week. Thank you and see you next week, Sunday, for a weekly wrap-up on a UATV. Stay safe and tuned for more.